again, my name is Catherine Williams. I've been with the division for 7 years, and I've worked in air quality for about 14 as also a compliance inspector. So I've been doing emissions inventories for 6 years, and this is like our third triennial using SLEIS, meaning that everybody is reporting. And then Elizabeth Slade is the other environmental scientist in the point source group, so I'll let her introduce herself.
Hi, I'm Elizabeth. I've been working with the division for almost a year now. I was an intern in 2017, and I migrated all of the old emissions inventory data into SLEIS when it was first uploaded. So that was fun. I previously worked at a copper mine in Arizona, so I have some experience from your guys' perspective at the private sector. So I have some sympathy on what it feels like to input some air emissions into an inventory. So happy to be here and happy to help with any questions you may have.
Thanks, Elizabeth. And then we have Ashley Sumner, who works in our outreach and communications group. So I'll let her introduce herself as well.
Thank you, Catherine. My name is Ashley Sumner. I work in the Executive Director's Office for the department. I've been here for about 3 years now, which is wild. And yeah, I will be helping moderate questions. So I think Catherine mentioned last time or promised that we would be pausing in the presentation every 10 minutes to ask questions. So I'll be on top of that. The best way to get your questions in the queue is to throw them in the chat, and I'll monitor that. And then also, if we have time, we will allow people to raise their hand and we'll unmute and ask questions that way. So please throw your questions in the chat and we will make sure to get to as many of them as possible.
Thanks, Ashley. We're really glad that you're here today. And just for those of you who are not familiar with the Google Meet platform, to raise your hand, all the buttons you need are at the bottom of the Google Meet screen. The hand that looks like this, that's to raise your hand. That will let Ashley know you have a question. And then the chat box there, it's the third to the right icon. It looks like a little word bubble, like from a cartoon. And so you can type in there and it will show up, and Ashley will monitor that. So without further ado, let's get going. This hour seems to fly by quickly. Like I said, this is going to be recorded and we will post it on our training videos website as soon as it's ready, which happened really fast last time. So that's exciting. And then we'll send another constant contact email once that is posted. Timeline. Again, this is a great way to learn how to use the chat. So if you know the date that the emissions inventory reports are due, go ahead and put that in the chat. I will do it right now so you can see what that looks like. Well, there we go. We got someone named Alyssa who found the chat. That's right. It is April 15th is when these reports are due. Dave Etman also found the chat. Good job. All right. So that's getting close. We're down to about 20 days left to work on these. Thanks, Brad. We see you in the chat too. All right, we will send one more reminder email about these reports on April 9th. And other than that, we'll try to minimize our correspondence. I'm sure that nobody likes getting mass emails. And we tailor our contact list to people who have only submitted. So if you submit, you won't get any more mass emails from us. We also encourage everybody to get started on these inventories as soon as you can. As you know, it's just Elizabeth and I that are here to help you. And certainly, if you have questions, please contact us. We are happy to help if we have the time. And as we get closer to April 15th, you will definitely notice that our time to help decreases. I think people felt that last week. I had a couple days off, and there were a lot of people trying to get a hold of me, and I'm still catching up on emails and phone calls. So. And one more final thing, I'm on spring break next week with my family, so I will not be holding regular hours. Elizabeth's schedule will be normal. So if you want to schedule a help session, she is the person to contact. I will definitely check voicemail and email, but it's going to be mostly outside regular hours next week. So plan around that, and we're going to go ahead and get started. So this training, we sent out another survey in our March reminder email, and people wanted the same thing. So this training is literally going to be the same thing as last time, but we decided to put more questions in there. So that's why we're going to break every 10 minutes and let you all ask questions. This is a start to finish example of how you would submit a report in SLEIS. It's going to be super basic, but I will try to add any tips and tricks that I would use along the way. And we are not going to build new release points, control devices, emission units, or unit processes. If you need to build new things or shut things down, there's videos on our training website, our SLEIS training videos website, that show you how to do those things. Okay, so I am sharing my screen, and the first thing we have to do is we have to log in. And believe it or not, that might be the hardest thing for some people to get past. So let's go ahead. The login button is right up here in the top right corner. I'm going to click it. A lot of times your browser is going to save your login information. So that's up to you whether or not you trust your browser to do that. I know it's like not the most safest thing to do, but I do that. A couple things about logging in. You have to enter the right password. If you enter the wrong password 3 times, you're going to get locked out. Give me a thumbs down emoji if you have ever been locked out of SLEIS. I know I have certainly been locked out of SLEIS, and it is not fun. So you can't do anything except, it's like Dave Detman has been locked out of SLEIS. So you just have to call us or email us or something. Try and get in touch with us. There's no other way to get your account unlocked. Elizabeth and I need to go in and do that for you. So please contact us if you get locked out. And I would also suggest, let me go back here at the login page. If you get to the point where you've tried 2 times to log in and you have not gotten it, I would definitely suggest doing this forgot password link here, because then you can reset your password and still get into SLEIS. And that's especially important if it's like after hours and you doubt you're going to be able to get a hold of Elizabeth or me to unlock you. So let's see, I logged in. Now I'm in my account and I can see all of my facilities that are associated with me. These are test facilities. This is also a fake account, so just throwing that out there. But I'm going to work on this test facility today, and the way I get into it, and like right here, it also shows you your roles. So I basically have all the roles here that a facility user would know. But here's another little tip. A lot of times people get to the submit function, like they're ready, they've done all their work and they're ready to go, and they can't submit. And usually that's because they're not a submitter. So you can go back here and double check, am I a submitter or not? Another thing that people run into a lot is they clicked viewer on their registration form and not editor. And so they can only view, they can't actually edit. So this is a good place to check, like if you can't do something, that might be why you don't have the right permissions. So I'm going to go over to the actions square over here, and I'm going to click this action square. And now I go into this one facility and I can see all of the reports that I have worked on here. So helpful hint, if you see like on my test facility here, I have a bunch of in-process reports from the past, and it is a good idea to go ahead and get those turned in. So this status column is important as well. This is good right here. I got my 2020 submitted, but everything else is in process. So I should work on those as well. But the one I'm going to work on this year is obviously the 2023 report. So I'm going over to our actions column and I'm clicking the button here. And now I get into my SLEIS interface for the year of 2023. So looking at this, how this is organized, this gray column over here shows us lots of things about my facility, like where it's located. This identifier is very important. Lots of times we may say, hey, like you may call us and ask us a question, but the first thing we need to know is, what is your facility? And if you have that identifier, it's a very easy way for us to figure out which facility you're talking about. These links, anything in blue, you can actually click. It could be a report. This one shows me when I last submitted. So anyway, lots of things to check out over here. One question I get a lot is when people get to the point where they're ready to submit, they're like, do I have to print a version of this, for safekeeping? And the answer is really no. You can access it in so many places. If you view the submission history, you can see each time that you submitted it, what the date was, and you can download what the version of that report was then. Okay, so another thing about how SLEIS is organized, we have these top 5 squares here, and these don't really change from year to year. So what I like to tell people is when you get into SLEIS and you're looking at your report, just what we're trying to do here is making sure that everything is current, nothing has changed, and there's nothing that needs to be added. So let's go ahead and the bottom 2 squares here, those are the things that are really pertinent to this year. So let's go ahead and look over the top 5 squares, starting with the facility tab. So I'm going to click on that square and I see lots of information. If I go down here to the edit button, I can actually change some things. So I'm going to click edit here, and you can see some of this stuff is you're not going to be able to change. These are things like this facility ID. That's something we generate for you. Actually, SLEIS generates it for you. The facility name, you're not going to be able to change that. These are things that are on your permit that if you want them to change, you got to go through our permit services to talk to them about it. But like if I go to the contacts, tab, then I can see there's boxes where I actually can change things. So maybe here I'm going to say, actually, I want to add my other last name. And maybe I also want to add, let's see, I'm going to add fax number. So let's see what that is. And I try to save it. And I get this little triangle right here with an exclamation point. And that means I've done something wrong. First of all, the first thing I get is this big red bar that says validation error. Please correct issues on highlighted tabs and save your changes again. So SLEIS is really good about telling you that something is wrong. If this is red, you need to fix something. If it's blue, that means you're good. You saved everything. You're ready to rock. So if I get this red bar, it usually gives me a warning of where that error is. So I'm going to go to my contacts thing, and it tells me more information. It says mentions contact phone fax number must be in this format. So SLEIS is pretty picky about some things and how they're formatted. So in order to save this, I'm going to change it to exactly the format that it wants. And save. There we go. Okay, so that is fine. I get the blue bar and everything looks good. On the addresses tab, you can see you cannot change anything about your location. Again, that is from your permit. And if you want to change the location of your facility, you have to talk to permit services because that's probably going to require a new permit. You can change your mailing address. So if we have the wrong mailing address in there, go ahead and change that. You cannot change your lat longs. And then this last one is owner information, customer ID. Those are things we need to know, and you can't change those. So it looks like I've done a pretty good job at this facility square level. I'm going to back out of here and move on to my next square. So if I go to the release point square, what is a release point? First of all, this is something that a lot of people don't know. Actually, let me back out one spot, and I'm going to explain kind of how these things link together. So the unit process is what you're going to see in your process submissions. And a unit process is made up of a release point and an emission unit, and sometimes a control device if you feel like adding it. So if we think about an emission unit, a boiler is a good example of an emission unit. It's something that's going to generate emissions. The release point is simply how they come out of the emission unit. So if I go in here and I look at this first one, I'm going to click, let's see. So in the actions, I now have a magnifying glass. That means I just go into view mode and I can see what's going on. The other one is a gear, and that means I can edit. So if I click that, I'll see the boxes that I can change. And by the way, if there is one of these red lines, it means that that is a mandatory field. So it has to have some information in it. Otherwise, SLEIS will not let you save. Okay, so maybe let's look through here, and maybe I've decided actually the stack is 15 feet tall and I want to change that. The best way to do that is to erase all of your stack parameter information because SLEIS will auto calculate. See how it just put another number back in there? So I'm going to go through and delete all of this. Oops. Delete and delete. And now I'll start over again. So I'm going to put in my real stack parameters. It's 15 feet tall and it's 2 feet wide. And it's actually coming out at 300 degrees Fahrenheit at a flow rate of, we'll say 500, oops, that's not 5,000, 500 actual cubic feet per second. And then if I click tab, it will auto calculate the gas velocity for me. Are we ready for some questions, Ashley?
Yes. So we actually don't have any questions in the chat, but I want to commit to our every 10 minutes. So if folks have questions, go ahead and raise your hand and we'll knock those out.
I'll pause for a minute. People.
For the stacks and all the information in there, is that automatically put in from when the permit was created?
Yes. So when your permit gets created, and this is Elizabeth's job, she's very good at taking the permits out of our permitting database and putting the ones we need into SLEIS. And we have some default stack parameters that we put in. We don't go to the length of figuring out exactly how tall things were. So if you see 10 feet tall, 1 foot in diameter, 72 degrees Fahrenheit, and 12 for an exit gas flow, that means that those were your defaults.
Thank you.
Yeah, you bet.
All right, unless anybody has any questions that they want to speak up with, we don't have any other questions in the chat, so maybe we can circle back in 10 minutes.
That sounds great. Thanks, Ashley, for keeping us on task. Okay. All right. The other thing I can do is maybe this is not a vertical stack. Maybe if this is if this was like a pile of aggregate, that's not going to have a stack. And what we call those is fugitive. So if I click, let's see, we're going to go with fugitive area right here. That's going to get rid of all the stack parameters, and I should be able to save that. Yep. And that's something to think about too, is does your unit actually have something where all the emissions are coming out of, or is it more that it's just coming out of everywhere? Other things in here, location, most people choose to utilize the facility coordinates. Not for right now, that's fine. I feel like there may be a day where EPA is going to tell us we need more detailed information, but by all means for now, just use this if you want to. If you have something that is more like an emission unit that's really big and has more, like it would be good to put the lat long in there, you can go ahead and uncheck that box and it will give you the option to put the actual lat longs of the emission unit. But for now, I'm just going to keep that box checked and click save. So now I'm backing out of here, and let me make sure I'm looking at my script to make sure I got everything I wanted to talk about. Oh, this numbering system, this is something unique that SLEIS does. And so every release point that is generated out of SLEIS will have a unique number. And you can see, well, when a release point is generated as fugitive, it starts with a 9. Otherwise, it's going to start with a 1. Okay, I think that is all I had to say about release points. Now, oh, nope, there was one more thing. Sorry. This function down here, this is where you can export all of your release point information, and it'll export it into like a CSV file for you, an Excel file. If you have hundreds or just many release points and you want to check them, that is going to be an easier option than going through the GUI here, the graphical user interface. So this is usually an option, this export function. There's lots of ways to look at all the data in SLEIS in an Excel file if that's easier for you. And this function here, this filter, you can type in the number like, and then it's gonna get it down to the ones that you need. So that's a really helpful feature as well. Okay, backing out. Now, control devices and emission units, those are really similar to the release points. And again, these are not going to change. The only thing that might change is if you had a new permit since your last reporting cycle and you need to add a new unit. Like maybe you have a new backup engine, maybe you have a new boiler, maybe you have some mobile equipment that you need to add. And we do expect you to report your mobile equipment in your inventory. So that's something that people get confused on as well. Your permit is going to list everything that we need to know about from a permit status, but the inventory should list everything that you're doing. So space heaters, mobile equipment, unpaved roads, those kinds of things need to be reported here. And if you have any questions about that, please get in touch with us, because yeah, there's a lot of extra things you can add. And we're always, when we do our quality control at the end of a reporting cycle, we're always trying to find those things, like where we can add them. So anyway, when we look at these three squares here, what we're looking for is, do these things still exist? Are they accurate? And are there any missing items? And if you feel like you've got answers to all those questions, then you're probably good. The unit process is, we'll just walk through this because it's different than the other squares. The unit process is where we link everything together. And so what we see here is, what emission unit are we using? Okay, we're going to use that boiler. And then are we going to apply a control device to it? And the answer is, this is kind of a funny backwards way of saying, is there a control device? Way of asking is it's not controlled, and the answer is false. And then we add the control device from our control device square. And then the third part is your release point apportionment. And so we're using that bag house that we saw in the release points, and we're saying that 100% of the emissions coming out of this emission unit are coming out of this bag house. There is a way, actually, let me go into this in edit mode. So for control device, like if I wanted to say that it is controlled, I could just click this right here and that goes away. But we are going to use that control device. So we'll save that. And then the release point apportionment, I could say, if I had multiple release points, which is pretty rare, I could say this is 50% and then add another, use this button right here to add another release point and say this is the other 50% comes from this release point. And the unit process also adds a very important aspect for us, probably not so much for you, except that it's going to help you probably figure out what emission factors you want to use. This is called an SCC code. And if you click any of these green question marks, it will pop up an answer for you. So that's way too small for you guys to probably read, but this will tell you what the SCC code is. I will summarize it for you. An SCC code, it means source classification code, and it's something that EPA generated to like categorize all of our emissions. And so when we're looking for a certain like SCC code, we can filter down to it. Or there's 4 levels of these SCC codes, so we can say, okay, we're looking for all boilers, and it's easy for us to find units that have boiler in their SCC code. The other thing is that if any of you have used AP42, it says what pollutants, like the emission factors are based on the SCC codes. And so each SCC code that's published in AP42 will have some pollutants and what their emission factors are. And that's like sort of how this whole thing works. You can calculate using those emission factors. So that gets us through the top 5 squares. And let me look at my script again. I think we're in good shape. We're going to go down to the second level here. So this is what you really have to focus on for inputting your data for the year. So if I click, well, I'll just tell you what these are. This is the process emissions. This is where the emissions go. The attachments is really like a voluntary thing. If you have a spreadsheet that helps you calculate all of your emissions, that's a great place to attach it. However, do not attach a report and not enter your emissions over here. So this is not like in place of entering your emissions. You have to enter your emissions. You can put in a report attachment if you feel like it. So I'm going to go ahead and open up the process emissions square. and we'll go ahead and go over here to our edit. And just going through these columns here, the emission unit is drawing directly from that emission unit square that we saw before in the top row. The identifier is the process that we saw in the unit process level. Here's this SDC code that we assigned at the unit process level. And this is our throughput, and the throughput is something that we're going to enter here. Generally, the throughput from the year before is automatically shows up in here. So that's something that when Elizabeth is doing the QC, she's often looking for that. Like, did you enter the exact same throughput as last year? Because it would be really strange if you had exactly the same MMBTUs of natural gas last year as you did this year. So make sure you put in your new throughput. Also new this year, there's the process is reported question marks. It's another kind of funny language thing. But what I can do is I can uncheck this box here, and I would permanently remove all my pollutants and gray everything out. And that is a great option for facilities that didn't have any operations that year. You can just uncheck that and you're done. Save that process and move on. I'm not going to do that for this purpose though. On this tab, so there's 3 tabs to the process emissions square. On this tab, really the only thing you have to do is change your throughput to what was current. And so for this boiler, I'm going to say this year we actually used 560 million cubic feet of natural gas. That's important to look at what the unit of measurement is. Sometimes it might be like tons, sometimes it might be 1,000 tons. So just make sure that you're at the right order of magnitude when you enter this. If we scroll down, I think a lot of people get sort of scared of all these supplemental calculation parameters. You don't have to enter any of these. This is all voluntary unless you get to the emission square, try to save something, and SLEIS tells you have to enter one of these. But it will tell you which supplemental calculation parameter you need to do. A lot of times we see that for like if you're using diesel fuel, it will say, I need to know the percent of sulfur in that diesel in order to calculate the SO2 emissions. Another time we see that a lot is for road dust. And so unpaved road dust, it needs like the moisture content, the silt content, and precipitation days, I think, something like that. And we really just need an average here. So you can just do your best to figure out what those parameters are. If you need help, if you're getting one of those errors, definitely get in touch with us and we'll help you. Is it question time again, Ashley?
It is question time. We do not have any questions in the chat. So if people want to raise their hand or just unmute themselves, go ahead and ask questions.
I have a question on the emission units. So if you click on one and then you go to edit, there is a option for status that says permanently shut down. If we do have that as what we have for one of our pieces of equipment, can we just do that? But do we also need to contact our permit writer to get our permit updated, or will that trigger them to change it?
I wish that would that would be the end of that for you, but it is not.
Okay.
Let me just explain to everybody who's listening what Dave is talking about is at the emission unit level here. You can click this right there, permanently shut down. If you're trying to do that, you need to give it a year before this report. So obviously, if it was shut down in 2023, unless it was January 1st of 2023, there's a chance there could be emissions. So for this one, I'm going to say it was shut down in 2022. And it's often nice to give yourself a note that says like, what is this unit? This is my rail loading rack. So we could say loading rack was removed in 2022. And then once I save that, then it says in this column right here, status is permanently shut down. That is also how we get like right here. Let me do this. I'm going to flip this one because if I change this back to operating, then I will now see it in my process emissions level. So if I go down here, I now have 2 things to report, okay? But I don't want to do that because this was not operating. So the easiest way to get that out of your hair permanently is to just change it to permanently shut down. Now, to answer your question about whether or not you need to get in touch with your permit writer, yes, that would be a good idea. You want those permits to be as accurate as possible. And I don't work in compliance, but I know like if an inspector came out there and they said you don't have this rail loading rack anymore, they would want you to get that taken off of your permit.
All right, Catherine, we did have a question come through in the chat.
Okay.
The question from Christy Webster is, if you have errors or missing data, will it save so you can go find the data?
That's a really, there's some tricks to this. So what Christy's asking is say I get here and let's change that, and I get some errors. A lot of times the errors come because you don't have like any pollutants on the emissions tab. And so it won't let you save. What I would do if I were you, like obviously that's not going to be a problem for this emission unit because it has plenty of pollutants. But what I would do in order to get past that is just enter some dummy data. I do that a lot. So like I might just put in some random pollutant like this one, and you look at that and you're like, I don't even know what that is. And then I would hard enter. So if I use this _0 method and then I just put a 1, I would be able to save this process, and all the other information like the throughput and the operations data would save. And I would just know I need to come back and change the emissions once I understand what I'm supposed to be doing.
Okay, that is the only question we have in the chats. And
Okay.
Yep, looks like we
Great.
can go.
Okay, so we'll delete that one for now. Let me go back to the process tab, and let me just look at my script real quick and remember what I was talking about. Okay, so we've talked about how you can like just not report this unit, and what Dave just brought up about permanently shutting things down. You should make that decision like when you're reporting this. If you have a bunch of equipment or even just one piece of equipment where you're considering unchecking this box, think about like, would it be easier to just shut it down and then you don't see it in your process emissions? I think the difference is like, say it was a bulldozer that you didn't use this year, but it still works and there's a chance you're going to use it next year. I would not permanently shut it down. I would uncheck the box. But say that bulldozer is broken and now you're just using it for parts, I would remove that. I would permanently shut that down, and that way it's never going to show up on your process emissions square again. Okay, so here's my throughput, and I've checked you, and Dave asked, can you temporarily shut it down? You can. The only thing I don't like about temporarily shutting it down is it doesn't show up in your process emissions square. So like then next year when we publish your report, it's not sitting there in your process emission square prompting you to report it. And so you might miss it. It's there, you can use it. We don't have a policy about it, but I think it's better to uncheck this box if it's going to be temporarily shut down, because next year it will show up at process emissions level. That's my personal preference. Okay, this tab right here, these are your operations. These also auto calculate for you. So if you want to change these numbers, the best way to do that is to delete them. And I like to use the tab button on my keyboard to get me through them. And then it's easier. It's like easier than using your mouse for some reason. So say I want to just say, okay, actually this is operating all the time, and I just want to do 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 52 weeks per year. I do that, and then it auto calculates the rest for me. Errors that happen here is like people have an actual hours per year that they want to enter, and then the averages don't match up. It usually says it has to be within 10%. So whatever SLEIS would auto calculate has to be within 10% of the hours per year. And that gets especially difficult when you get down to like an emergency generator that's operating for like 1.2 hours per year. You really have to mess around with that to make it work. But you can do it. And again, if you're really struggling, just give us a call. Monthly operations, if something's going to operate 24/7, this is what that would look like evenly throughout the year. Again, this little that little question mark right there helps you figure out what the even percentages would be. That's a great little tip. And this, I think, also has one of those, like, if it's not adding up to close to 100%, it's going to let you know. And then finally, we get to our emissions tab. Now, we have actually, hold on, let me look at my script, make sure we did everything. Oh, I know what else I wanted to say on the process tab. Say you are getting to this unit process, and you look at the throughput combinations and you're like, I don't have either of these numbers. Like I don't have the cubic feet of natural gas, and I don't know what the BTUs are. You can pick another SCC code. You can go back to the unit process level and pick another SCC code and hope that you get a better unit of measurement. That might be a good time to call us as well to help you walk through what would be better. But I think, like, if I was giving anybody like a hint as to how to make this easier for the next time you're doing this, is make sure that you have the like data in place. So for this boiler, make sure the easiest way obviously would be to put like a flow meter on that boiler so that you can check it. You could check it January 1st and you could check it December 31st and say, okay, in this entire year, this is how many MCF of natural gas went to this boiler. If that's too expensive, or it just not feasible, then maybe this BTU is a better way to do it. And we do a lot of conversions. So like your data plate on your piece of equipment might say how many BTUs it uses per hour. And then you could multiply it by the number of hours that it operated. So there's lots of ways to get this data, but once you get through this cycle, the best thing to do is set up easy ways to get this information so that the next time you have to do this, it's a lot easier. Let me see if there was anything else I wanted to say. Okay, we talked about the operations tab. I think we're moving on to the emissions tab. Now, we have had an update this year. It used to, usually, like when you got into SLEIS, if you had a new emission unit, this page would be completely blank. And that's kind of terrifying for people because they had no idea what to report. I'm going to show you guys something. Let me save this. Okay, I got my blue banner. I'm saved, and I am going to go out to the home page. So we have a lot of links on our homepage that are supposed to be helpful for you to get your emissions inventory done. Like, for example, here's our registration form. I know people use that all the time. Here's a user guide that helps you to understand if we don't have enough information out there for you. But one we put out a long time ago was this required pollutants. And it's literally just a Google Doc we created to show people, okay, if you have a boiler, these are the pollutants we expect to see. If you have an engine or a generator, this is what we expect to see. If you have sand and gravel equipment, that's what we expect to see. So if you get back to, let's log in again. Oh, I am logged in, sorry. Let's go back to where we were. Okay, if you get to this page and it is blank, then use this guide to help you figure out what pollutants to add. And the way to do that is to click this add button down here and you can start searching. So if you know that you need to also include chlorine, you can start typing that in. It will give you there's obviously a lot of pollutants that have chlorine in them, but eventually you'll get down to here. This number is called a CAS number. It's how EPA refers to the certain pollutant. So anyway, that's how you add a pollutant. We're not going to do that right now. This enhancement essentially is taking the SCC code and any published emission factors that are associated with it and pre-populating those pollutants for you. And so right now I'm actually done. What it did was it took my throughput, which is right here, 560 million cubic feet of natural gas. It multiplied each of these emission factors and then divided it by 2,000 because these are in pounds per unit. And that is your estimated tons. So at this point, I can look at this and be like, okay, I think that looks about right, and feel good about submitting it. This is the place where if you do not like this emission factor, if you have a different emission factor you want to use, maybe you had a stack test. What you could do is go ahead and click stack test. This calculation method is how we change how SLEIS calculates things. So if I put stack test in here, I'm going to say, let's see, I think the other one was 7.6. I'm going to say, actually, our stack test showed that this boiler is only creating 5.6 pounds of PM10 primary per MMSCF. And then it should calculate that. I'm also going to put the date of the stack test. So I'll put, actually, it would probably need to be in 2023. There we go. And if I click save, it now has a new estimated emissions in tons. Oh, but then that was a bad one to do because then you have to make sure that all of your PMs add up. So give me a thumbs down if you've ever had the errors for the PMs in here. This is a tough one because what it's saying looks like quite a few people have. So what it is saying here is that there's 5 particulate matters that we expect you to report. There's PM10 primary and PM10 filterable. If you think of a filterable, the filterable is like what the baghouse would catch. So there's PM10, which is 10 micrometers, or yeah, I think that's right, micrometers in size. It's tiny. And then there's PM25, which is even smaller. It's 2.5 microns. That's the right unit of measurement. And so the filterable is the part that actually comes out of the stack as like a little tiny piece of dust. And then the condensable is the particulate that comes out of the stack as a gas. And then when it cools, it turns back into a particulate. Ashley, do we need to do questions again?
Yes. We just have one question in the chat and then obviously an opportunity for people to raise their hands.
Mhm.
The question from Ernest Gibbs is, could you show how throughput might look for a baghouse?
Sure. Let me fix this first. So let me get rid of these errors really quickly, because I think I just have to do that. Well, no, let me finish this thought and then I'll answer Ernest's question. So the way that I would fix this is all it's saying is that like your filterable emissions cannot be more than your primary conditions. I think that's what this one says. When PM25 primary and PM10 are reported, PM25 primary cannot exceed PM10 primary. So that's a little bit different. What it's saying here is since I decreased this emission factor, I have a smaller tonnage of PM10 primary than I do of PM25 primary. And if we think about sizes, 2.5 is smaller than 10. So 2.5 is a subset of the PM10 primary. And so only part of that PM10 primary is going to be PM25. So I would have to think about what I want to do. Like, you know what, maybe my stack test, we'll change this one too. Maybe my stack test said that this was also, that it created PM25 primary at like 2.5 pounds per unit. And I'll put in my stack test date for that. And we'll see if that will save. Okay, I still have a couple more. This one says PM25 filterable and PM con must be within 1 ton. So what we're gonna do, let's see. We're gonna change this one to a stack test as well. And that is, what did we say it was? 2.5. and give it a date and save that. And I think we'll get ourselves down to one error. Okay, sweet. So we are able to save that. Okay, now going to Ernest's question about what would the throughput look like for a bag house. Bag houses are kind of funny because if we think about a bag house, it's really a control device. But a lot of people report their will use the bag house as an actual emission unit. And I think maybe that's what you're talking about, Ernest. That's a tough one. Because then you have to pick a an SCC code that is going to give you a like throughput combination that's more like dust, and it probably would be maybe tons of dust. I might have to think about that one, unless Elizabeth has one on the top of her head of what an SCC code would be for a bag house. Because like I said, it is weird. It's like the bag house is controlling the emission units, but we're just going to report what's coming out of the stack. Elizabeth, would you do me a favor and just write that down as a question to follow up on, and we can email Ernest?
Yep, I can do that.
Okay, thanks. Okay, Ashley, any other questions?
No other questions. So we'll
Okay.
plan on 10 more minutes.
10 more minutes, and then it's going to be at the end of the hour. Okay, so we are back to our emissions. Again, all those errors, you just kind of have to finagle. But what SLEIS wants you to do is make sure that your PM10 primary is larger than your PM25, or at least equal, and that the condensable and the filterable are adding up to the primary. Kind of complicated, but you just kind of have to think through it if you get those errors. Okay, so the last thing I'm going to talk about here, I think, oh, hold on, let me just look at my script, see if there's anything else. We talked about the _0. So somebody asked, oh yeah, I know, when we were talking about how to sort of bypass the saving function, changing this to just, so I'm going to keep that number 2352, but if you want to just put, like, say you have a spreadsheet where you're calculating everything and you don't need SLEIS's help, what you can do is use a different calculation method, like site specific, no emission factor. So maybe I'll use that for carbon monoxide because I already know the answer. I already know how many tons I need. I'm just going to enter 10 tons. And this is a great place to add your spreadsheet so that we can see how you calculated it. And if you want to be really nice, you could say something like see attached spreadsheet for calculation. There's a lot of places to put comments in SLEIS, and that helps us to understand how you did things. It just increases the transparency.
Can I make a quick comment about comments?
Yes, please.
Can you, when filling out your emissions reports, make sure to clear out comments from prior years though, because that does get kind of complicated when I'm reviewing to discern whether a comment is from a prior report or a comment from the 2023 report. So just make sure that if there is a comment in there from a prior report that you're clearing it out.
Thank you, Elizabeth. That's a really good point. If that comment is specific to this report, we don't need it in the next report. The other thing that comments do is, like, it seems very often that people retire between cycles, especially for those of you only reporting every 3 years. And there's a lot of times we are helping people who are new to the job and they do not have a clue how the person before them was doing this. So the more comments you leave, the more little breadcrumbs there are for the next person who's going to have to do that. So it's a way of like paying it forward to those people. Let's see what else we have here. This easiest calculation method is the 8_2 calculation method, and SLEIS uses that. It's associated with the SCC code. If there are emission factors associated with that SCC code, then they're built in and it will do all the calculating for you. So that's a good thing when you're choosing SCC codes, is to try to figure out which one has all the emissions associated with it. Let's see what else is in here. Okay. Okay, So the final thing I wanted to show you is if we have a control, how you would put that in the control device and have it show up in here. So let's say that we had, let's say we have a low NOx burner for this boiler. What we're going to do is we're going to go out of here and one more, and I'm going to go up to the control devices, and I am going to change a couple things. So the control measure that's where we tell it what the control device is. And so I know that I have a low NOx burner, and there it comes up, number 205. And I can also change the description. So like, let's actually give this a description. We'll call it the low NOx burner instead of just control device. And then here is where I add the pollutant that I want to control. So let's say I want to control NOx, and I click on that. And let's say that this is another place where you kind of have to like think backwards. If this is asking how much of the NOx it's going to control. So if it's going to reduce the NOx by 75%, then we say, okay, 75% is controlled. So we'd see 25% of the emissions. I'm going to go ahead and save that. And now there's two ways that you can use this information. If I go back to the process emissions and I click edit, let's see if it showed up here. So my NOx is, let's see. Now I see that it's 75% controlled. And so what that is saying is it's saying, okay, I'm multiplying my throughput of 560 million cubic feet by 100 pounds per million cubic feet, and then divided by 2,000. But then I'm only going to take 25% of that and report it because this is controlled by 75%. That might be good enough for you. The other thing that SLEIS offers is some of our SDC codes have post-control emission factors in here. So, or maybe this, yes, that's right. So when I look at this, it's going to bring a pop-up window up, and it shows me that I do have two different emission factors for a low NOx burner associated with this SDC code. I can hover over the description, and it will tell me the difference between these two. And I'm not really going to get into this. This is something that you would take the time and figure out which one's more appropriate for your unit process. I'm just going to click this one. Now it's changing this calculation method to 8_1, which is post control, and changed my emission factor. And now the emissions have changed as well. And you don't see that controlled portion because this is saying after this low NOx burner is applied, this is the new emission factor. That's pretty complicated. And if you need any help with that, that's another great way, good time to get in touch with us. All right, I'm saving this one last time. And I will show you the final steps you have to do in order to submit it. I'm backing out. I go down here and I validate. And this is great. It says no errors were encountered while validating your submission. Sometimes there are going to be errors, and there's going to be a link to an Excel file that you can download. It will tell you what all the errors are. It might look intimidating, but you just work through it line by line to figure out what they are. Over here, there's a tiny checkbox. That's where I click that I am ready to submit this. You have to be a submitter you have to have that role in order to click that or have that checkbox populate for you. So if you don't see that submitter is one of your roles, that's when you need to get in touch with us. I back out of here. Now says this is validated. I'm going to initiate my submission. I have to click view the electronic document. I'll just save it to my downloads for now because I know that it's in here. I don't actually, it's saved in SLEIS anyway. I'm going to click continue. Now I have to validate who I am. I am the owner of this account, and I have the authority to submit this, and I have reviewed the electronic report. I click continue, and now it's going to ask me one of my security questions. And so this is where a lot of people get tripped up. But when you created your when you created your SLEIS account, it asked you for 5 security questions. Just do your best to answer them. If you get stuck, we have a way to reset your security questions. We can do that for you. I'm going to hope this is my password. This has been kind of funny. It like grays out the continue, but you're able to click it. And once you get to this, you've done it. We will get an email that you have submitted, and we will see your submitted report in SLEIS. And I think that's it. If anybody has any more questions.
We've got a couple questions in the chat, Catherine. I'll just go through those.
Sure.
From Susie Smith, what is the difference between an 8_2 and an 8_4 calculation method?
That's a really good question. Let me go back and yeah, here we go. I'm back at my process submissions. Oh, now it's submitted. So I can't, show you right now. Let me go back out and see if I can
Do you want
show
me
you.
to reset it for you?
You could, or let me just go in here. I think I should be able to do it in this one. Yeah. Okay, here we go. Here's an edit. Okay, so 8_4 is 8_2. SLEIS is going to find the emission factor for you. 8_4, you are going to enter the emission factor. I don't know why it still is EPA emission factor pre-control, because I think, in my opinion, that just means that you're drawing from AP 42, which should be in the 8_2. And a lot of times I see people use 8_4 and enter the emission factors from AP 42, and it's, it would be a lot easier to just use 8_2.
Okay. One more question from the chat from Kathy. Can you please confirm that only individual HAPs where the facility total exceeds the HAP threshold need to be reported?
That is technically how our rule is written now. What Kathy is referring to, if you look at R307-150, which is the emissions inventory rule, and I can't remember which section, I think the HAP section is section 7 now. It does go through a very specific list of HAPs and how what the threshold is for reporting. We also have that on our homepage right here. So if you download that, it will show you this file, which is what we used to use. And so what we're saying is, if you have this 111 trichloroethane, you only have to report it if it's over 500 pounds per year. So if this is still helpful to you to know what things you need to report and what things you don't, by all means, you are still within the regulation to do this. Part of this enhancement that we got this year, where it pre-populates all of the all of the emission factors associated with the SCC code, is to try to bypass this, because the way I see it is you have to calculate it to know whether or not you're over the threshold. So it doesn't seem to help people that much. And then some of these thresholds are incredibly tiny, like this one, dimethylhydrazine, is 0.52 pounds per year. I mean, that's hardly anything. So yes, still use this table. You're still within the regulation. And hopefully this new enhancement is going to help everybody to report HAPs more accurately.